Hello!
Hello!
Hi guys! So, back on YouTube at the normal time after yesterday's live vlog where we had to pop over to Facebook.
At the normal time without any of those darn comments.
Yeah, I loved having the comments.
Oh, they were all getting a bit chatty for my liking. No, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. So yeah, yesterday's, if you haven't seen it and you're only watching through on YouTube, you can watch it. You will just have to head over to Facebook for that one. If you go on Facebook, search Chris Chopping - stand-up comedian, and then go to the videos on Chris's stand-up page. It is one of them there. However, theoretically, now we should be able to in future go live on YouTube, which we may do in the future. I actually really enjoyed doing it, so I would quite like to do that again, but we certainly wouldn't do it every day.
No, we don't want to
tie ourselves to 8 p.m. every day for the rest of forever.
And that's it, because normally with these, also other people can watch them whenever they want, but some people went out of their way to tune in at the correct time, which was lovely, and comment and join in, but we wouldn't expect that of people every day.
No.
That
might be, being a little ambitious. But yeah, so it was really, really good fun. So I would recommend popping on and having a little look if you have missed that. But yeah, back here as normal now. Today is day 101 of our lockdown. And it is the 29th of June. What day is it? It's Monday today, Monday the 29th of June. So yes.
Vlogging 101.
Vlogging 101, yeah. So we don't know how long our particular lockdown is going to carry on for, but it's looking fairly grim for people of Leicester, who are the first place in England to have to reverse the easing of lockdown measures. They've had a big breakout in Leicester, which actually, by looking at the figures, looks like it actually accounts for about 10% of the new cases for the whole country have all sprung up in Leicester. And as with this bloody virus, the true figures are likely to be higher, but you've just got to wait a while before you see what you're dealing with. And of course there will be people who are asymptomatic. So yes, they were originally sort of what they'd said was Leicester's having a bit of a problem, so we're just not going to do the scheduled easing of restriction there. But actually they have revisited that and gone, no, not only that, so they weren't going to be able to open the pubs and things like that. Not only that, they have actually gone, no, we're going to have to take a step back. So non-essential shops have closed, schools have closed, and yeah, so they've gone sort of back to how initial lockdown was for them in Leicester. So that will be the first time that a local lockdown has been enforced. I don't think it'll be the last time that's the case. And I can see, obviously, local lockdowns are a great idea because it means other places where it doesn't seem to be sort of in the community can sort of carry on and make some money for the economy and have a bit of normality. However, I do think that they won't be as effective because if people can travel wherever they like and sort of people can go into Leicester and out of Leicester and things like that, it will still perhaps spread. And like it said, it's not like it's out of transmission in the rest of the population, but hopefully a lockdown, a local lockdown will mean that sort of local health provisions won't be overwhelmed and it will all sort of remain relatively controlled. So that's the hope. I don't think it's hugely encouraging though, considering that was sort of the case before they'd actually done the next stage of releasing lockdown measures. If they're in some places having to go, nope, we got to backtrack, I sort of feel like that's enough of a sign that maybe we don't need to go further down the road. But I guess time will tell on that one. Maybe if you can nip a local outbreak in the bud, it won't have too much overspill into other places, and maybe that's the way to go forward. I suspect we'll see a lot of that over the coming months and years possibly of okay, right, this city has got to go into lockdown. I imagine the policing of that is tricky because you've got sort of boundary lines and people going to sort of be very
and you haven't got like kind of big daily things in the news and everyone telling you it's all
it's going to be sort of
like the information being disseminated locally. And
the amount of like how difficult that will be for local authorities to police and inform and sort of handle will be very difficult, I would imagine, of just getting the message out to everyone that the rules aren't what you're seeing on the news. They are local and they are sort of different, will be difficult to police. I would have thought.
What I would like to know as well is, and I don't know if there's already information out there on this, to be honest, but is what happens. Obviously now things are pretty much still in lockdown anyway. There's still furlough in place, all the rest of it. What happens, months and years from now?
Yeah.
If there is another lockdown, will the government be stepping in to support local businesses and individuals?
I would imagine not, to be honest. What they have done with sort of local with businesses now at this stage is they are gradually going to wind back the furlough scheme, and you will just have to rely on. There are still loans that are available that are sort of like admittedly like quite what's the word, like quite appealing, quite sort of good, reasonable loans, which are 100% backed by the government in order to keep businesses ticking over. But there's no more sort of grants and handouts coming to anyone. If it's local, I think like policing a local lockdown. What if you live in Leicester and you work somewhere else? Like, so you work in a non-essential shop in, I don't know where Leicester is, so I don't know what's near to Leicester, I'm afraid. But yeah, if in a nearby town or city, if your city's on lockdown, does that mean you have to go by, well, no, I can't go to work because I live in Leicester? And vice versa. I guess it's tricky for people who don't live in Leicester who work in Leicester. So it's going to be more difficult to sort of police, more difficult to organise, and it will be complicated. But I do see the reason for it. If it's going well other places, then maybe we do only need to do local measures, and this will be the first time we sort of have to sort of put it into practice and see how it works.
The concern for me personally is like if I am ill and take a day off from my day job, I don't get paid for that day. If I'm suddenly told,
you've got to stay off work for 2 weeks because there's a lockdown,
but the government aren't helping, we aren't making any money, and for no fault of your own, you're not doing any work, but we can't afford to pay you for that time. That's going to be...
Well, I think the national rules will apply, which are basically that for COVID-related sickness through having to take time off work to self-isolate or because you have symptoms, the rule is that you are eligible from day one for statutory sick pay. But statutory sick pay is a pittance, really. I think it works out to about 90 quid a week, if that. Which, yes, admittedly, it's better than nothing, but that is not going to be equivalent to whatever you would have earned in that week.
90 quid if you're working 5 days, is it?
I think it's just a weekly amount that you get. I think so. If you're not able to work, I don't actually know because I haven't looked into the sort of legislation of COVID related. But I think it's a bog I don't think it's like on an hourly rate. It's just if you're not able to work, this is the amount of money that you get. Which is why it's not that much more than what unemployment benefit is. I think unemployment benefit is. Last time I sort of checked, it was sort of £70-something a week, and I think sick pay is 90-something.
I don't know how the benefit system works these days, but it used to be if you were on like job seekers allowance, you could also get housing benefit.
Yeah.
Presumably, if you're on
statutory sick
pay for a fortnight, you can't.
Well, statutory sick pay actually gets paid to you through your employer, and they claim it back when they're doing their taxes and stuff. So it's basically so it won't have. You won't have things to sort of show, and to be honest, for housing benefit and things like that, you wouldn't deal with those if it was for a short-term thing anyway. Like housing benefit would be like something you'd apply for if it was a permanent long-term thing.
No, I understand, but that's my point is that if you're off work for a fortnight and you're only getting the statutory sick pay and you're not getting housing benefit...
Oh, it's not going to cover your rent for that month. Like, it's going to be a big, big challenge to people. I assume... maybe this will be sort of a kind of trial run, and problems that arise through it will be fed back to sort of they'll be being dealt with by local authorities, but if there are sort of massive glaring faults with the system, then maybe they'll get dealt with, but it'll all be after the fact. So yeah, it's going to be challenging, I think, for sure. I'm glad, as I keep saying, that we've been more cautious over here in Wales. But I wouldn't rule out even down the line when we do sort of open up a bit more there may well be local outbreaks anywhere, and I think if we're not doing this in a national approach, but in a more localized approach, then everywhere's going to have little outbreaks here and there that then can go, oh yeah, okay, you guys have to go. But that in itself will be very complicated to sort of inform people and police, because what if you're going for it, you don't know that the place you are going is in a local lockdown, like you just, I don't know, I'm going to go to Leicester for a day trip, because this one probably is going to get quite a lot of news because it's the first time anyone's had to do it, so I dare say you'd have a good chance of knowing. But if they become more commonplace, I guess other than sort of signs on the motorway, signs and like sort of announcements on public transport and things like that, if you actually were just trying to travel into a place, you wouldn't necessarily know.
I don't know. I feel though we're about 10 minutes in, and I feel like through no fault of our own, we've just started off on a slightly downery topic, and we've actually had quite a good.
We've had a lovely day, yeah. Well, actually, today's been a really nice, lovely, enjoyable day, individually speaking. We've watched some cool telly, watched a great documentary. Ari and my mum, Ari is my niece, and my mum came round for probably only about an hour because the weather's a bit grim. It wasn't actually raining, but it is cold. So it's amazing that like a week ago I was absolutely bemoaning how hot it was, and today was proper like coat weather.
I've done a first draft for a script for a video that I'm planning to make,
which I'm quite enjoying. Sort of, you're writing it, but I think there's a lot of collaborating going on there
and making suggestions. I am not. We won't talk about what that is yet. But
no, we'll keep that. Play that card close to our chest. But watch this space. There's actually another video that needs to still go out before that.
Yes,
anyway,
that is true. That I'm still. I meant to finish the editing of that today, and it's just. It didn't get around to it for reasons. Because of the reasons.
There were reasons.
There were reasons. You have to take our word for it. But we did find time to watch several episodes of The Boys.
Well, we started The Boys yesterday.
Last night we watched the first episode.
We watched a couple. Today. 2 or 3. It's brilliant. I love it actually. So we were talking about it last night on the vlog. On the live vlog, about the fact that we intended to watch it. So we did start last night, and I've got to say, I am absolutely gripped. I'm loving it. There's a great cast going on. If you don't know anything about it, it's on. Is it on Prime or on Netflix?
Prime.
Amazon Prime. It's sort of it's a superhero sort of story, but it isn't actually really your typical. The heroes aren't necessarily all that heroic, and it's sort of life in a universe where there are superheroes, but it's sort of very much like controlled under capitalism, and
they're sort of treated like rock stars, but they also have like big PR teams.
Very much about sort of popularity and PR, and then there's sort of some like quite dark sort of underbelly of the reality of that, but it's very gripping. Really good cast. I'm loving the storytelling. Basically it's a binge watcher. It's very difficult to finish an episode and not go, what happens next? Let's just watch. So we've done a lot of that today.
I think someone had recommended it to me a while ago. Well, my friend Garrett had recommended it to me a while ago. But that was just reaffirmed by, I think I'd mentioned it previously as something I wanted to try and watch, but that was reaffirmed by Joe and Shani yesterday.
I still don't know why it's called The Boys.
I think The Boys are the guys.
Carl Urban and Huey character.
Huey and so
on. I sort of assume so, but it's not really made implicitly clear.
No, it's
maybe because it is based on a graphic novel or a graphic novel series, and maybe it's more clear in that, and they've just kept with the same title. It will become more clear, but we're sort of on episode 4 or 5, 4
yeah, The Boys,
and it's just called The Boys, which seems like quite a vague generic title. It isn't only men. There are not enough, but there are some strong female characters in it as well. Never enough. And they're all scantily clad. But it's superheroes. That's the shtick, and that's actually critiqued in it a little. But yeah, it is. I'm very much liking the sort of female superhero character. She, obviously there are several, but the sort of main one, the protagonist,
called Starlight.
Starlight, yeah. I'm interested in her. She seems a little bit squeaky clean and naive, but there's an edge there, and I'm looking forward to getting to know her more. And yeah, Huey is Huey is not a superhero. He is sort of an everyman, but kind of falls into quite a dramatic superhero-based universe, and there's sort of an underbelly of people who are against the superheroes. There's a lot going on, but it's brilliant. And sort of the opening scene with Huey it's a wowzer. In fact, there's quite a few scenes that was like, ooh, crikey, but I won't say what. But yeah, yeah, maybe not one to watch while you're having your tea. Depending on how strong a stomach you have. Yeah, there's a few quite shocking scenes.
I happily would watch it with my tea, but I'm...
You know what I mean, though. Like, no, it's not the most appetizing.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But yeah, and we probably would have ploughed through a couple of more episodes of that easily, quite happily, except that we then had another recommendation to follow up on, from our friend Harriet.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we watched it. It was brilliant. We've been talking for various reasons about kind of wanting to be better allies to specifically the LGBTQ plus community, but specifically the trans community for various reasons, which I'm sure we will go into at some point. But so we were talking about that. So we're talking to a few friends and asking for sort of recommendations of places to start to better inform ourselves, because we're both cis het. Well, I'm not entirely het, but you know, mainly.
I'm tediously cis het.
Yeah, I'm fully cis, but I'm not fully het. But actually, I will say, because I've got used to sort of that being in common parlance, but I am actually thinking there may be people that are watching this that don't know what that means. Het is obviously short for heterosexual, but cis, I didn't know what it meant until sort of a few years ago. Basically, being cisgender means that you your sort of gender identity is the same as the biological sort of thing, the gender you were assigned at birth. So born with a vagina, and you also express femininity. You consider yourself to be female, a woman, etc. So if the opposite to that being trans. So if you are transgender, you may not be expressing a gender identity that matches perhaps the gender that was assigned to you at birth, basically. So if somebody refers to somebody as being cis, that's what that means. So it's easier to think of it as the opposite of trans. Is the best way I can sort of think of it, because sort of it doesn't naturally roll off the tongue. I don't think sort of cis. People go, what does that mean? I do like. Whereas trans, I think people are more familiar with and sort of aware of what that's probably to do with.
I am cis, het, male, and white.
Able-bodied as well, no disabilities.
The only other thing I could probably have would be tall. Would be good.
I don't think that makes you like an oppressed minority, though.
No, I'm not saying it does at all. But I have seen studies that say that tall people are more likely to get jobs and
yeah, I think that's probably about the only box you don't tick in terms of absolute privilege across the board.
Quite a minor box. I'm also not from a wealthy background, I guess.
But you're not from a particularly.
Oh, I'm not from.
You're not from poverty
background at all.
But yeah, obviously the higher up the wage bracket,
as the saying goes. But yeah, my point being is that
I'm fairly high on the box ticking, but I'm female, which is a disadvantage. Piss off. And also, obviously, I have a long-term health condition, which I tend to avoid using the term disability, not because I think there's anything wrong with the term disability, but I feel it sort of sounds like I'm exaggerating.
Well,
because I'm largely able to live a normal life. I don't have obvious limitations.
The point I was going to make, though,
based on me there.
The point I was going to make, though, is I am all of those things. I have all of those privileges, which makes me a part of the demographic group that is the least well-informed on so many issues, and yet the most confident and outspoken.
Yeah.
And I feel like I should take ownership of that now, because I realise that might not always come across when I'm sat next to Ellie.
What do you mean by that?
I'm just saying that sometimes you might appear more confident and outspoken, but as a cis-het white man, I expect it's probably me, really.
Okay. Well, it would be people's expectation of you, if not the reality.
And you are probably better informed, which is probably true as well, because you do a lot of the reading for this while I sit reading about Hulk.
It depends on what we're talking about on the blog, but I think you're pretty well informed. I think I tend to just do I'm just a little bit more of a perfectionist on just fact checking, because you'll know the stories I'm talking about, but
Yeah,
I'll
but
just
then
tend to go I'm just going to check what the numbers were. I'm just going to check what the date, just
Yes, whereas
the
I would be,
details.
there's a guy that's done
There's a guy who's
thing,
done a
right?
thing.
I don't know his name, but this is the thing that he's done, and that actually means that there's going to be a rise. I don't know how many it's going to rise by, but it is going to rise. Like, I know all the stuff, but then I don't. I'm not details oriented.
I changed that habit though through doing the vlog, because I think it was when I was talking about things and going, oh, I'm going to need to check that I got into the habit of then, because to begin with, we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't have we always sort of have a list of topics to cover, and usually when writing that list of topics to cover, I will just do a quick fact check on any of the details that I'm not sure of, so that when I'm talking about them, I don't have to go, oh, I'm not sure. But we do usually also try to cite our sources basically in the blurbs, so if we mention articles, I try to post them. Obviously some things are just sort of what's the word, can't think of the word, but nope, it's gone. Things that we just experience that may not have sources to cite, but if there are, I try to.
I've realised one thing that I am more informed about than you is wrestling.
Oh, absolutely.
And before we get back to disclosure, just a very brief sidebar. I'm going to talk about a bit of positive wrestling news.
Okay.
Because there's been so much negativity for so long. What with the
speak out sort of,
and all the scandals and things. I mean, the speak out is hopefully
and then being all
leads
COVID-y
towards positive things, but it's obviously
it's a heavier subject,
quite
to
heavy,
cover,
and and all the COVID stuff, and it's been quite a depressing time to be a wrestling fan. But a bit of positivity. A group calling themselves Black Wrestlers Matter are planning on putting on a live show. This is going to be in America. So the chances are, if you're watching this, you won't be able to attend, but it's going to be a card full of entirely black performers.
Oh, cool.
And it's just supposed to be kind of like a celebration of black wrestlers, and just really nice, positive thing.
Part of one of the sort of wrestling companies, or is it sort of an independent
I believe idea? It's like an independent
cross
yeah,
wrestling? Oh, that's good.
I imagine it will all be from kind of indie promotions and stuff, or smaller promotions. I don't suppose we'll be seeing WWE or AEW getting involved, but
it'd be nice if they did possible. A little.
Well, but then also maybe it's a chance for kind of less famous black wrestlers who don't already have some spotlight.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think it might give a bit more attention if there's just a little presence, maybe of ex-wrestlers, or just a sort of.
I don't know if they've announced any names yet, but it's certainly. It seems like
a
little bit of positivity.
That's
people
nice
kind of doing something, actually, taking some positive action and things. Anyway, as we were saying, we were talking about
Disclosure, which was the documentary that we were watching. So this was recommended because we. So I will go a little bit more into just why we just kind of thought, because we kind of had a bit of a realization that both of us, I think, consider ourselves to be allies, certainly. But then sort of the realization that just sort of considering yourself to be not sort of transphobic or homophobic or any of these things, that's not really enough in and of itself, because you have the privilege of not really having to think about it.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a massive privilege, because there are people, it's the same issue that we had with the Black Lives Matter movement, is we needed to become more informed so that we were more aware of how your life might be different due to being part of a certain demographic, particularly if it's a marginalised or oppressed demographic.
I think you can see books and films and articles being recommended and shared around, and you kind of, I think sometimes it's easy to feel like, well, sure, but I mean, I already agree with
a goodie
and support these groups. I shouldn't have to do the reading.
But we just sort of, and it's very easy to do that, and I won't necessarily sort of chastise anyone for not, but it's just, I think we should just kind of realise.
It's not like we've turned our lives around and now we're all reading everything about everything.
But we're just sort of trying to become a bit better informed. So we're asking for a good starting point, some recommendations from some other friends who we know are already better informed than we are.
And actually, if anyone watching this has got some recommendations that they would like to share, then do that in the comments, and we'll see about getting around to those as well.
Disclosure is basically, it's about how transgender people have been portrayed throughout the history of sort of film and television, really. because it doesn't really go into sort of books and things, but it's mainly how on screen. And it's fascinating. It's really, really interesting and eye-opening. A lot of stuff in there that I was entirely unaware of. But I thought very eye-opening. So many moments of, oh my God, that's such a good point, and one that I would never have come to just on my own of imagining how it must be day to day. So many moments of, oh my God, like I never even thought about that. And that in itself shows that everybody should be kind of doing the reading and doing the viewing, because it is eye-opening and it actually feels quite good to do so, because then you feel like, oh, I've actually gained something from it. And also, it's not a slog. It's a really interesting documentary. It's not like they're going like, oh God, I'm doing the reading. Like it's really interesting, really engaging.
Because sometimes it can be, you can see like a brick of a book about some issue and feel like, oh, but that doesn't look
really
like
should.
I should, but I'd rather
I'd
rather read the latest Martin Amis novel or whatever it might be, and you just.
It's not a slog. It's very captivating. It's very
engrossing.
It's really engrossing. It's a hefty documentary. I think it's about an hour and 40, something like that.
Makes some really interesting points.
Really interesting, and there's some really beautiful moments in it. Actually, a couple of times I got a bit choked up. Like sometimes for sort of sad and sympathetic reasons, and sometimes for really like heartwarming, like, oh, we are making progress and good things are happening, and so a bit of both. So it's not, I wouldn't say, like, it's not like a super easy watch, because there's quite a lot of stuff being discussed, but yeah, very eye-opening, and so many things that like I previously just sort of thought, oh, well, that's positive representation because it's telling trans stories. But then one of the main things that was pointed out, which as soon as it was pointed out, I was like, oh, yeah, of course, it's obvious. But so often these trans stories that are being told are similar stories, and usually quite upsetting and violent stories. And the trans characters are usually victims of violence or the butt of the joke. And there's very little in the way of positive trans representation, and also representation of trans people without it necessarily being about the fact that they are trans, because all of this kind of boils people down to one aspect of their personality and one aspect of their identity. And if anybody did that to you for whatever your identity is, if someone just boils it down to one thing, that's really frustrating and insulting, because you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm more than just that. Well, there we go. A trans person is still just a multifaceted person, and maybe the only focus shouldn't be just on their transness, although we should be comfortable being around that transness and sort of interested in that transness.
And also, they made the point really clearly, I thought, about why trans roles in film and television should be played by trans actors and not by like men playing trans women and so on.
Well, that's the thing, because it really enforces this, like, because particularly, because actually one thing that also penny drop moment, trans women are not represented enough in the media, but trans women are represented far more often than trans men. I don't think many because they had plenty of examples, not always positive examples, but examples of trans women, very few of trans men, and I think the sort of the trope being that for sort of big Hollywood films where there's a trans character and a trans woman, getting a cis man to play a trans woman is the norm. But that reinforces, so even if it's a beautifully done film and it's very carefully shot, it reinforces the idea that trans women are really men, which they're not. So why can't we cast trans women as trans women? Because I think, like, so much of these stories want to sort of cover the maleness to femaleness. And it's like, well, can't we maybe work backwards, have a trans woman and sort of have them act the transition? They're going to do it much better. Well, not necessarily better, but more authentically. They're going to have that experience to draw from. And I think quite a lot of it was that this sort of discomfort in trans women being seen as women, and that's a travesty. Like that's basically probably the bottom line of most transphobia is the idea that these people are not really who they're expressing themselves to be, whereas it's the opposite. They are who they are expressing themselves to be, and who they used to be is not them. But the idea that, like, there's a disconnect with that, and that's probably because, well, it is because many reasons, but one of which is media representation. So it goes into all of these things from a trans perspective. All of the voices in it are trans people, mainly trans women, but there were a few trans men. It's
great
so
because
interesting.
All these points are, like you say, being articulated by trans people, and it, and they are articulate and intelligent, and because so often the representations that we see on screen are kind of stereotypes and often negative ones.
So often they're written by cis people, but also for cis people. So another really poignant point that came across of it was, I wonder if at any point some writer who thinks they're being really sort of worthy and really like groundbreaking and telling important stories, and they are potentially, but have they ever actually thought how it will feel to be a trans person watching this? And I think overwhelmingly the answer is probably not. They're not writing these with that in mind, and that in itself is surely that should have been. But again, it's a penny drop moment. You don't realise what you don't know until it's pointed out, and then it's like, oh, of course, but it's not obvious because it doesn't factor into your daily life. If you're cis, it's just not constantly being, you're not constantly being made aware of it in the way that trans people would be, and that the same goes for being non-binary or sort of anywhere on the gender spectrum that isn't just out and out cis. Absolutely fascinating.
And the documentary includes clips from film and television going all the way back to like the 1920s.
Oh yeah, fascinating.
Right the way up to present day, and it's a real mixed bag of kind of clips that are kind of quite obviously and deliberately and willfully kind of offensive or kind of making fun of trans people, kind of transphobic. Then there are some clips that are kind of maybe a bit more neutral, perhaps things
trying to be quite sensitive, I think, but actually badly. Maybe like you're like, oh, actually, yeah, that missed the mark.
And then there are things where you go, oh, okay, these were like seen and probably would have seemed to us if we'd watched them sort of now, would have seemed like, oh, that's really well-meaning. And again, some of these have aged more than others and better than others, but people trying to be really well-meaning, and then you realise, no, a lot of this is still problematic.
Yeah.
But the film, it's not just, complaining about all depictions, it's also talking about positive depictions and ones that trans people have seen, like when they're growing up in their formative years, have had a positive influence on them, and more positive depictions kind of going forward.
Yeah, it really, I think the overall tone of it is optimistic, but it's also realistic, and it's pointing out issues that most cis people won't have thought about on their own. They won't have come to that on their own because it takes I consider myself to be quite an empathetic person, but just the daily life as a trans person is so different to my own that I might not automatically make the connections that somebody else would. So that's why, even if you think you're an ally, you can be a better ally. You can do more reading, you can do more. And yeah, it's not a slog, it's interesting and a really good talking point. And so yeah, we're going to do more of that. So expect more of this.
Absolutely.
So that's Disclosure, and it's on Netflix.
Speaking of trans issues, though, we were talking yesterday, just briefly, about how, was it yesterday or was it even the day before, a known transphobe, Graham Linehan,
oh yes, I think it was the day before,
been banned from Twitter now, which is good.
Yep.
Glad to see him taken off that platform, and he'll have to,
spout his bile somewhere else.
Absolutely.
I'm sure he will continue to spout his bile, but at least not on Twitter, to such a massive platform that's easily accessible.
But something that's happened now, it's a bit of fun. Someone has posted to Twitter a script that they've written. I suppose you'd call it fan fiction, although I don't suppose they consider themselves much of a fan.
No, yeah, I guess, yes.
At least of a writer, if not maybe they kind of did used to enjoy the show and now feel a bit like about it.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. But anyway, they've written a new kind of script for an episode of the IT Crowd, in which Moss and Jen and Roy have all moved to California to work at the headquarters of Twitter, and the episode follows their adventures as Graham Linehan turns up trying to get his account reinstated. And
good work.
Hilarious satire ensues. So we'll share a link to that. It's I've
not seen it myself. Chris literally just told me about it, so I'm quite keen to read that myself.
I literally found it about 15 minutes before we started recording this, so I haven't had a chance to actually read the whole thing yet. But so far, so good.
Good work, whoever that was.
I'm going to be retweeting it, and we'll put a link in the
will do for
thing
sure.
here. So yeah.
Oh crikey! I've just looked at the time. 35 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's short by our standards these days.
I know, but no, I thought. We didn't cover one or two things, but they're not things that desperately need to be discussed today.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was looking over that. I was looking at the time. I was thinking, yeah, brilliant. We can end on the fun bit about the IT Crowd, and we'll wrap up. We'll look super professional, and then you throw yourself under the bus.
Normally, I'm keeping an eye all the time, but I think I've just been sort of quite just enjoying the chat today.
Yeah.
Not that I don't normally.
Normally
but,
it drags. I'm just there eyeing the clock.
No, but normally I'm just a bit more like, are we going on a bit too long on this one subject or anything? But actually today it's just flown for me. But yeah, so we'll be back tomorrow. As ever, it will go live every day at 10.
And again, if you have any more recommendations for us,
hit us up.
Yes.
If you've had any penny drop moments that you just sort of think, oh, this was eye-opening, then yeah, hit us up, because we're on a bit of a I kind of in that, I want to absorb more. I want to I've got a bit of momentum on it now. But yeah, so that's what we're up to. We will be back tomorrow. In the interim, obviously, like and subscribe. No shame in that whatsoever.
There's no shame in it.
None.
Bye.